Welcome to Terror at Collinwood. I am delighted to be joined today by my guests, Rich Handley and Aleah Shockley, and we're going to be talking all about the Collins Family album. But before we get to that, I have some news for you. First, some very sad news. Bob Issel, who you've heard on the podcast and is a longtime Dark Shadows fan, has shared the news that Joe Caldwell has passed away at age 97. Joe Caldwell was a prominent writer on Dark Shadows, and from Bob here, he says, "I'm sad to report that Dark Shadows writer Joe Caldwell, age 97, passed away yesterday morning, July 13th, after suffering a massive stroke. Joe, who was born on October 2nd, 1928, first joined the Dark Shadows writing staff in May of 1967 and is credited, along with good friend and fellow Dark Shadows writer Ron Sproat, as developing the character of Barnabas Collins." Bob goes on to add that over the last several years, Joe was kind enough to sign several copies of his memoir, In the Shadow of the Bridge, which, by the way, side note, is fantastic, for the raffles held at Seaview Terrace, Collinwood, in conjunction with the gatherings that Bob hosted there. He would sign each copy, Dark Shadows Forever. Thank you very much, Bob, for sharing that news. He posted that in the Dark Shadows Collector group. Really sad. I had been hoping to have Joe on the podcast. I was having a hard time getting in touch with him the last few years, and it was suggested to me that it would probably, due to his age, it might not be doable. So, and I was just talking about him very recently. In fact, I referred to him as the last surviving Dark Shadows writer. However, I'm not entirely sure that's the case, because when I went to verify this, and I probably shouldn't have said that before verifying it, but Ralph Ellis, who wrote 2 episodes of Dark Shadows, I believe he's still with us because I have found no evidence that he passed away. He went on to write, I think it was A Days of Our Lives, and General Hospital. He wrote a lot of episodes for that. And the last reference I could find him was 2005. He received an award. But I found another Ralph Ellis from the UK, sports writer who passed away. But I believe our Ralph Ellis wrote 2 episodes of Dark Shadows, is still with us. That said, Joe Caldwell is the last of the prominent, I guess, Dark Shadows writers who wrote many episodes of the show, who is no longer with us, sadly. Maybe somebody can say a few words about Joe at the Dark Shadows Festival coming up, which, by the way, tickets are still available to the Dark Shadows 60th anniversary celebration. There are only a few left, though, from what I understand, it's almost sold out. So if you want to go, or if you're planning to go and you've been waiting on buying the tickets, I recommend getting them ASAP, because it's almost sold out from what I understand. I believe the luncheon is already sold out, so that's off the table at this point. Saturday is almost completely sold out, I believe, for the event. And then I think there still might be some tickets Friday. I also think the Sunday visit to Greystone, I want to say that's sold out too. So there are a few tickets left. So if you've been debating whether you're going to go and you decided to go, now is the time to grab those tickets on Eventbrite. Of course, the link is in the show notes to that. I mentioned in the last episode, Daytime Gothic Volume 2 is up for pre-order right now. Dark Shadows news page has announced that the charity fanzine Daytime Gothic is now at the printers and will be released in July. The pre-order link is in the show notes. It's going to be packed with lots of great stuff. A letter from David Selby, the chaotic backstage saga of Dark Shadows' short-lived Canadian rival Strange Paradise. I am honored to have written a piece as well on Dark Shadows merchandise that should exist, and that's a lot of fun. The visuals Stuart created for that, he gave me a sneak peek, and they're just incredible. Really cool. It's going to make you salivate for more Dark Shadows merch, I suspect. Chris Pennock, remembered by friend and collaborator Ansel Farage. Dr. Julia Hoffman, the making of a Dark Shadows icon. How Art Wallace's 1954 teleplay The House built the foundation for Dark Shadows. Mark B. Perry tackles the thorny question, was Dark Shadows truly camp? Series creator Dan Curtis celebrated with a look at his unproduced biographical screenplay and an unpublished interview with the man himself from 1968. Unpublished interview extracts with actor Mitchell Ryan. The story of how a unique Dark Shadows behind-the-scenes film was discovered in the archives of the BBC. Oscar-winning screenwriter John Logan reveals everything he learned from watching Dark Shadows. Rare photos from Jonathan Frydd's 1968 publicity tour. Laura and Catherine, a wide-ranging interview by Catherine Lee Scott conducted shortly before Laura's death in 2023, with special photography by James Storm and Valerie Pronio Storm. And there's artwork, fiction, humor, lots of cool stuff. Make sure you snag your issue of the charity fanzine, Daytime Gothic. I also announced a couple episodes back, but in case you missed it, there is a new Dark Shadows animated series for adults. It's a dramatic gothic animated series, which is in development at Warner Brothers. So hopefully we'll be hearing more about that at the Dark Shadows Festival. And speaking of the festival, a couple more guests have been announced through the Dark Shadows news page. Kathy Curtis, one of Dan Curtis's daughters, will be at the event. Jim Pearson will interview Kathy on stage as part of the Friday itinerary. In addition, Ellie Pouget has been added to the guest list as well. She played Maggie Evans in the 1991 Dark Shadows series, so that's pretty exciting. And Catherine Lee Scott was just on the Pop Culture Classics podcast recently with Greg Ehrbar, and she mentioned a couple of more guests that may be at the event, so give that a listen. It's actually a great interview with Catherine. She talks about Dark Shadows, of course, but she also talks about her writing career. Patty Karapinar, who you heard a few episodes back, talking about her upcoming book, Dark Shadows by Design. She has announced that the book is at the printers. Hopefully we'll be seeing that very soon, and Patty's going to be sharing some info about the book and Cy Tomashoff at the Dark Shadows celebration. So that's great news. What else have we got? Catherine Cressman emailed me and let me know that she has 3 Dark Shadows articles coming in 2027. The Marilyn Ross Dark Shadows paperback novels in Weird Fiction Review 2027. An article on the Dark Shadows fandom and LA convention. Retrofan number 50, May 2027, and an interview with Marie Wallace in Retrofan number 52, 2027. I was recently on 2 fantastic podcasts and had a great time. I was on Midnight Mass with legendary drag star Peaches Christ and brilliant filmmaker Michael Varrati, and we talked all about Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, a film that I've loved since childhood. And we talked all about Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. We talked about classic horror, Monster Kid craze. We talked about all kinds of fun stuff. Batman 66 got into the mix there. So I'll put a link in the show notes to the Midnight Mass podcast. I was also delighted to be on my friend Erin Haas's podcast, Hallowed Groundling, where we talked all about the classic Twilight Zone episode, Escape Clause, starring David Wayne. We talked about a variety of other fun topics as well, including Dark Shadows. We talked about Batman 66 again in that one, the Golden Girls, the different devils of the Twilight Zone, and so much more. That was a lot of fun, so I'll put a link to Hallowed Groundling in the podcast notes too. Now, finally, a few things here. If you have not gotten your Terror at Collinwood t-shirt or tote bag yet, or stickers, whatever it is you'd like to snag, head on over to the Penny Dreadful the 13th TeePublic shop. There's always a link in the show notes to that. As of this recording, there is a big sale at TeePublic. They have sales all the time. But if you want a shirt or a tote bag in time for the 60th anniversary Dark Shadows Festival, I suggest grabbing the items immediately from the TeePublic shop so they can have enough time to print it and send it to you. And if I see you wearing a Terror at Collinwood shirt or carrying a tote bag, I will hand you a sticker. Speaking of stickers and conventions, there's also the Monsterama convention in Atlanta coming up the weekend after the Dark Shadows Festival. So it's going to be the second weekend in August. My wicked scary alter ego, Penny Dreadful, will be there. I will have Shilling Shockers DVDs. I'll have Penny and Dreadful and Garou t-shirts. I will have 8x10 photos. And I will have Terror at Collinwood stickers and postcards at my table. Of course, the main course is the celebration of Richard Matheson and also the Dark Shadows 60th anniversary, which is continuing that weekend. That celebration, Catherine Lee Scott will be there, James Storm will be there, Sharon Smith Lentz will be there, Dr. Jeff Thompson will be there, Mark Maddox will be there. Lots of great guests. So come on over to Monsterama in Atlanta if you can't make it to the Dark Shadows Festival, or come to both. Oh, and back to the t-shirts, I got this picture from Rick Boisneau, who's doing his part over at the Witch's Dungeon Classic Movie Museum, and he displayed his Terror at Collinwood shirt in the Wolfman display. And he sent me a picture of that, so thank you for that, Rick. Another way to support the podcast directly is through the Buy Me a Coffee page. If you want to drop a few bucks in my coffin, that would be sincerely appreciated as well. And with that said, I think that's all the news I have. Let's get to the show. place to hide. This podcast is fun, but there are spoilers inside. Welcome to the strange and unsettling world of terror at Collinwood. 'Tis I, Penny Dreadful, taking on the form of my despicable doppelganger, Danielle, and I welcome you to the show. I am thrilled to be joined by my two guests today, Rich Handley and Aleah Shockley. Rich Handley, who you've heard on the podcast before and can find at richhandley.com, has authored books and essays for DC Comics, IDW, Topps, Boom, Dark Horse, Titan, and more. His anthology, Musings on Monsters, Observations on the World of Classic Horror, was nominated for a Rondo Award for Book of the Year. His prose anthology, Planet of the Apes, Tales from the Forbidden Zone, received multiple Scribe nods, and he co-edited IDW's Eisner-winning Star Wars, the Classic Newspaper Strips collection. Rich edited Eagle Moss's Star Trek graphic novel collection, co-wrote Magnetic Press's Planet of the Apes role-playing game, and has penned licensed Star Wars, Star Trek, and Planet of the Apes fiction. He has written about many other franchises as well, and he worked with DC on the acclaimed Swamp Thing 1989. Rich has 25 years' experience as a magazine editor and currently works in academia. Aleah Shockley is a graduate of Columbia University, where she studied drama and theater arts with a concentration in design, received the Austin E. Quigley Prize, and was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa. She has been a costume designer with One Flea Spare, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, The Tempest, and Beyond the Rain. Assistant costume designer with Stupid Effing Bird, hair and makeup designer with Bona Varda, and dramaturg with A Midsummer Night's Dream. Aleah is an amateur fencer, swing dancer, Disney Parks historian, and mid-20th century aesthete. She lives in Indiana and works freelance as an artist and illustrator. View her portfolio at aleah.pb.design. Welcome to the show, my friends. It's so great having you both here.
Absolutely.
So great to be here.
Oh, my goodness.
Two of my favorite people, I have to say.
Shucks. I'll send you a check later for saying that. So hey, does anybody use checks? I'll Venmo you later. So here's the what we're here to celebrate beyond the 60th anniversary of Dark Shadows, which in and of itself, I mean, gosh, the news keeps coming left and right. And part of that news, a big part of that news, is this great new book that you have both conjured into existence, written by Rich, illustrated by Aleah, the Collins Family Album. My goodness, the fandom is very excited about this book, and as they should be. And
are we?
But yeah,
Yes.
I got yeah, it's awesome. I've gotten some peeks at it, and people are not going to be disappointed. This is a must-have book on your shelf. So congratulations, both of you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So let's kick things off here by talking about this book from Chinbeard Books. So, Rich, you wrote this book. So, what is the Collins Family Album?
So the genesis of this goes back about 10 years or so, maybe more. I was doing yet another rewatch of the show because 1,200 episodes is, that's nothing. You could keep redoing that. And while I was watching it, I kept seeing them pull this dusty book off shelves, and it didn't always look the same. but it was this album that I wished the camera would turn more towards it. I wanted to see it. And then over time they'd show portraits on the walls, and I was like, who are these people? People would pull out diaries, and I'd say, I want to read this. And then it struck me while reading the comics and listening to the audios, God, there are just so many Collinses. And I wish that I could pull this down and say, here are all of them. Because there's an absurd number once you start taking into account the Marilyn Ross novels, the rebooted TV shows, movies, and so forth. And then I said, I'm going to end up rewatching this again, aren't I? So as soon as it ended, I started over. And this time I started taking notes. And so what this is it's not the same format, because honestly, 400 pages done like the TV show. 400 Collinses done like the TV show would be like 1,000 pages, since they had one page per, but it is more encyclopedic, but with beautiful artwork from Aleah accompanying it. Um, 400. Actually, I think it's 409. Every Collins who appeared in the TV show, the MGM films, the 1991 show, the Burton film, the 2004 pilot, the off Broadway, well, the New York off Broadway show, the novels, the comics, the audios. I was floored how many there were once I was done. Um, but and then at one point I reached out to you and I asked if you were interested in proofreading it, and you didn't have time, but you thankfully introduced me to Aleah, who turned out to be a godsend because I had no idea at the time that you had just introduced me to an extremely talented artist. So I thought that I was just having her read this thing, and then one day she sent me a something silly. I think was it Roger Collins and Kermit the Frog, I think was the first one.
Oh, yeah,
And
Jason McGuire is played by Kermit the Frog.
that's what it was. Yeah, yeah. And I burst out laughing, and then I was like, first of all, this looks amazing, but second of all, that was very funny. Next thing I knew, I asked her to be the artist on the book, and it's been a true collaboration since then. It hasn't been my book with Aleah assisting; it's become our book, and just so excited to have her involved.
Fantastic. Aleah, now is your name pronounced Aleah or Aleah? I've always meant to ask you that.
So it's Aleah, but
Oh,
I took a couple years of French, so I they say Aleah, so I'll answer to either.
okay, okay, gotcha. Okay. All right. So, Aleah, so Rich has been on the show a few times, but this is your first visit to Terra at Collinwood.
Yes.
So, and I always like to ask my guests when they first come on to the show what their origin story with Dark Shadows is. So, could you tell us a little bit about how you got into Dark Shadows?
Yeah, so this is kind of topical because we were just talking about how the new versions sort of bring people to the original show.
Mhm.
So I was introduced to Dark Shadows for the first time through the 2012 film
Oh,
when I
wow.
was 12 years old. But then it kind of fell off my radar for quite a while. And then a couple years back, they were running reruns at like 2 or 3 in the morning on a local TV station. This was when I was in college and my mom was watching it. So then when I was home on break for, let's say, Christmas, she asked me to find it with her on streaming to start from the very beginning because they had just jumped in. I couldn't tell you where they, probably in the 300s, let's say.
Mhm.
And so she had asked me to help her start all the way back from episode one. So we sat down and watched from the very beginning together all the way to the end.
Now, were you having come from the 2012 film, which is a comedic depiction? Well, it starts
Mhm.
out pretty, serious, but then we get into the comedy part of it. Was it a surprise to you when you watched the original series that it wasn't presented that way, or were you aware of that it was a dramatic series?
Um, I guess. Well, this is kind of sad to say now that I love the beginning so much. It's my favorite part of the show. But of course, for a long time, I was bored and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm watching a soap opera with my mom. This is like nothing like the movie. Like she said, there was a vampire in this.
Uh-huh.
What this is not the same. Um, I think tonally, uh, I don't think I was surprised. I knew it was a soap opera, so I knew
Mhm.
it was going to be melodrama and
Mhm.
sort of the quasi-serious tone of daytime TV. But yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you're the first guest I've had who's come to the original series by way of the 2012 film, and I have heard online, people saying that they discovered the show that way. So it's good to hear that because, the film definitely has a lot of it's controversial. Let's put it that way. So,
It's
uh,
yeah.
so it's good to know, that it definitely did
Yeah.
bring people to the original. So,
Mhm.
Rich, I want to ask you about the book and the process of doing this. So, for those who may not know yet about this, which you may already by now, probably, but it's a massive, I would call it a reference book to every member of the Collins family from every single iteration of Dark Shadows. I mean, the TV show, the movies, the comics, the novels. You mentioned the off Broadway play from 1988. That's in there. Versions of Dark Shadows even are referenced that didn't get off the ground. I mean, it's just bananas what you got in there, and it's almost 400 pages, isn't it?
It's still in the layout stage, so I don't know what it will be. I mean, manuscript wise, it's
Mm,
up there. It's pretty close to 400.
yeah,
Uh, things end up usually a little different when you lay a book out. So
right.
I'm waiting for the final page count, but it's yeah, you could kill a small child with it, and then they would come back and haunt you as a poltergeist, and yeah.
Of
So
course, of course, of
Mhm.
course they would. So
Yeah.
tell me about the process of putting this together. I mean, I can't, it's mind-boggling what you did. It really is. I mean, when you first sent me that PDF, I said, how in the world did he do this? I mean, it's just,
yeah, the
how?
few people I've shown it to have had that same reaction. I they were kind of like Homer Simpson in the bushes, backing away from me, like this man is insane. Uh, I've done several books like this in the past, and
Mhm.
this was far, far more work. I very naively assumed it would be the same kind of workload as the previous ones, but I don't know why I thought that with more than 1,200 episodes, and that's before you deal with anything else. So what I started doing was originally, what I started doing did not work, which was I was trying to do it with a spreadsheet, but I very quickly realized spreadsheet was going to be completely unwieldy. So I abandoned that idea. But I started taking notes about every character as they appeared in each episode. And every time that and one that was mentioned, like if Abner was mentioned, obviously didn't appear, but I took as many notes as I could about their background, their characteristics, who they were related to. And that, whew, figuring out who was related to what was especially interesting because Laura Collins exists.
Yeah.
And so it trying to figure out, okay,
Our
wait, so Roger is
ancestors.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah, like David is Roger's uncle. Like there's some things that don't make any sense until you stop and think, wow, that's weird. But I started taking as many notes as I could about how people were connected. I've seen people online create family trees. There's no way you could really make a graphic for this. It would be the size of a billboard because there are so many of them.
Mhm.
But it became fascinating, and so I started doing the same with the audios and with the novels and taking notes to how each of these branches, these continued the story of these characters beyond the show. And so several of them, the one MPI and Big Finish and Dynamite, they're in the same time branch as the original show. But then you've got the newspaper strips and the Ross novels and Gold Key and all the reboot TV shows and movies that are their own time branch, which means that there are a good dozen Barnabas characters. There's not just Barnabas.
Mhm.
And so it
Mhm.
very quickly added up, especially when you have Gold Key having things like an issue in which Roger and Liz are married. And I actually listened to that episode of your show about 2 weeks ago at the gym and was cracking up. But that means everybody in that issue is a separate Collins because it clearly is not the same timeline as the rest of Gold Key, and so it just snowballed fast. And before I knew it, I had a manuscript that drove me to drinking.
Well, I'm a brandy or sherry, I hope.
Yeah, well, okay. I'm glad you asked that because Aleah visited me a couple months ago, and we hung out for a week, and she introduced me to brandy, and it was quite
You've never had brandy before?
I don't know that I have. I mean,
Wow.
I mean, I probably did, but I never. I was never. I'm not much of a drinker,
Mhm.
and I'm picky.
Yeah.
But it was quite
Mm.
good. I may be a brandy drinker now. I may be a day drinker. I may have to walk in and pick up a decanter that has no
Yes,
label on it and start drinking.
you knew the decay. I have one, I have to admit, and I do from time to time. I fill it with brandy, but I don't drink that often. But every so often, I do want to have the snifter, and then if I had a
I, I,
fireplace, I would throw it
I
into the
kind of
fire.
want one.
What's
But
that?
you asked about the process. I said I kind of want one.
Yeah,
You asked about the process.
yeah.
A very important part of the process was that once I sent it to Aleah, I asked her to rip it apart. And because I mean, I strive to have this be accurate. The last thing, I've seen what happens when Star Wars fans pick up on a typo. I've seen what happens when Star Trek fans pick up on a thing that's wrong. And I was determined that wasn't going to happen. And thankfully, I mean, I could tell you, for given that in her introduction, Aleah said that she started in 2012, and I've rarely met people as knowledgeable about the original show as Aleah is. So it's amazing how recently she came into it compared to a lot of us. And so she was invaluable. I mean, she ripped it apart. This. I would recommend this. This may be wrong. I love this idea, but it doesn't make sense. And so, and the book's better for it.
Yeah, I remember your Aleah, your script part. You went over to UCLA and
Yeah.
got a lot of the script, and that was such a cool thing that you did. Talk about the artwork for it though. So you got involved initially helping with proofreading, and your artwork is phenomenal. I
Thank you.
love your website, folks. Go check out Aleah's artwork on her website. I've seen you post on social media a lot of great stuff. So talk about how you went from proofreading to doing artwork for the book.
Yeah, so Rich kind of told the basic story. I draw a lot of silly things, which is mostly what I post to social media, silly dark shadows things. So I'd sent him one of those. And that's how, he got introduced to me being an artist, and brought up the idea of maybe illustrating the book. And it ended up being half an art question, half a layout question. It also really helps to divide up the sections, give you something to look at before you dive into all these entries for the columns of a specific time branch. You get to kind of look at the family presented in front of you and have a reference point back, I would say, to the visuals. So it's part artwork, part like, giving the readers an anchor, I would say. But as to how I approached the project, I would say I have tried. I don't know that I've succeeded. I have tried to be as thoroughly researched in the artwork as Rich has been in the writing. It was really.
Absolutely. It's not just try, succeeded. Yeah.
I mean, so by that I mean like the clothes that they're wearing, the jewelry they have on, all of those things are going to be things that exist to the best of my ability in their original format. That looks a little bit different for the Ross illustration, where I was kind of inventing a lot of those
I was
things.
going to ask you about that.
Um,
That's so cool that you did that. Yeah.
but still, like wherever I could, I read through all of the Ross novels and took notes on what they were wearing, what their hair looked like, what so where those things existed, they're wearing clothes that were referenced in the book. But I did have to invent a little bit.
Yeah, I saw, like for example, Ernest Collins from the Ross
Mhm.
novels, and
Yeah,
your take on him, and some of the Collins family members from the novels. You took inspiration from like Hollywood actors and TV actors, and
yeah,
you can see the vibe of that actor in the depiction that you created. So it's really
yeah,
very cool. So you have like
yeah.
family portraits, basically, of
Yes.
different versions of the Collins family as we go through the book. Now, Rich, when you said that this book, you mentioned Abner Collins, for example, many of these entries are very in depth, with really in depth write ups that cover the backstories, right down to the smallest details. And you cover every version of each character. But then other entries are shorter. For example, I pulled one here, Jonah Collins, whose name was on a gravestone, and the entry is an ancestor who died at age 23 on June 15th, 1863. His gravestone was located in the Collins family cemetery. To the point where you're pulling the names off the gravestones and include, because they're Collins family members, so as
Yeah.
they should be in there. Yeah, that's really cool.
I tried to make this as complete as possible. I can tell you from experience on other books that the day after this is published, somebody is going to reach out to me and say, "You forgot Jessica Collins," and I'm like, "Who the hell is Jessica Collins?"
Yeah.
And then they're going to show me photographic evidence that I forgot Jessica Collins. It's going to happen, but but I tried hard not to have that happen.
But then that's
For
a good reason to make a revised version of the
Oh,
updated version.
absolutely. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, the animated series is a good reason to make a revised
There
version
you
at some
go.
point. So, when it comes to a character like Angelique or Barnabas or Quentin, the entry is going to be several pages because there's not just even the TV show alone. There's a lot of information and a lot of it
Hmm.
contradicting, which requires some interpolation and so forth. But then each of them has their own stories in the various spin-offs, especially the Big Finish. But when you get to a character like Jonah or Abner or even Isaac, I mean, there's not a lot about Isaac that we
Right.
know other than in the audios. So those entries are by definition, they're just going to be a lot smaller because I wasn't going to make anything up. Like I wasn't going to say Abner was a clothier who, he lived with his wife Jessica. Like I wasn't going to make all this stuff up because I didn't feel that that was my place. So I just presented what has been specifically said about him, and I sourced it. As you saw in there, everything is meticulously sourced in case anyone wants to look up where it came from. Like if somebody reads, this is not in the book, but Barnabas loved to be a balloon animal clown. They're like, oh come on, where did he get that? Episode 1246.
Yeah. You do
know.
have a system that to
Yeah.
designate each
Right.
where things came from, but also
Mhm.
there's one thing you do that I like. I mean, I love the Dark Shadows wiki, but one thing that kind of drives me up a wall with that is that people combine things that were set. For example, you have the stuff that happened in the show, and then there's stuff that happened in Big Finish or in Lara
Mhm.
Parker's novels. And then it's merged into the entry for the character in the Dark Shadows wiki without any distinction. So people think, oh, they in the show this happened. But I like when there's some designation that lets you know, well, this came from the show, but this information comes from this source, right? So you actually, can you talk a little bit about how you came up with a system for that?
So I have to give credit where it's due. One of our first conversations, you and me, was you mentioning that fact. I don't remember if I'd started writing the book or if I was thinking. I don't remember how long it's been since we met, so I don't remember if it was before or after I started writing the book. But I gave serious thought to that because you were right that if I adore the Big Finish stuff. I really like the Dynamite books. I like Laura's books get a little off the track in terms of jibing with the show at times, but they're fun. And so I thought if I'm going to include information from those, it really would not do justice to not acknowledge that this is something different. And so because of you saying something very similar to what you did, I tried to come up with a way that would allow for people to say, I want to pick and choose what I accept as canon. By the way, I never used the term canon. Canon is meaningless to me. What matters is if you enjoy something. But there are a lot of people that do take that seriously. So I thought of it in terms of an arm and fingers. This is the TV show. Dynamite, Big Finish, Hermes, and so forth. For all of these branch off of one thing, which is the show. And if you're a person who uses the term canon, that's canon. So in the entry, I have all of the information about Barnabas's life, and then in one timeline, Barnabas did this, blah 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 blah. In another timeline, Barnabas did this, and after each of those sections is the source so that people can tell, oh, this came from Sam Hall's TV Guide article. This came from a Big Finish audio, and here's the
Yep.
one that it came from. This came from Lara Parker's book. It gets a little trickier before episode 1245 because there is stuff about their backgrounds, which I also have in the entry. But that's where those sources come into play. Because if you're somebody who says, I hate Big Finish, okay, just ignore all the paragraphs that are Big Finish related, and you're good.
Well, my thing is, I think because there are so many continuations, I guess you would say, in terms of, you
Yeah,
mentioned all of them, the Sam Hall article, Big Finish, Dynamite Comics, the Laura
right.
Parker novels, that are all set in the timeline of the TV series where it
And
continues
they
return
don't
to
they don't
Collinwood.
they don't have the same information, and that's where it becomes a problem.
Right. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's like I like the way you described it. And parallel time is built into the show itself, so you can
Mhm.
kind of look at it that way. How?
Oh yeah, not to interrupt you, but that's actually something that was useful with Aleah as my partner. Is that we talked about how to approach that early on because I think parallel time was the answer to all of this. Parallel time was how I was able to work that stuff in
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
if there's one branch of parallel time, maybe there's others.
Yeah. I agree. What do you think about that, Aleah?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's built into the show in terms of like just structurally parallel time, as well as like, things like Quentin. There's a version where he's a poltergeist, and there's a version where he lives to the present day as an immortal. And
Mhm.
all those kind of things are very much built into the way Dark Shadows in the show itself. And then all of the other, I would say almost all of the other adaptations I can think of have things where they have a version of things that happen one way and then have a version of things, like you said earlier, the Gold Key comics, there's a version where Roger and Elizabeth are married, and there's a version where they're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, I think it would have been an impossible task, and not what you were trying to do, to try to make a unified, okay, this is what's happening, because then you're deciding for everyone else what, you know
Yeah.
fact you want to go with, or what
Right.
plot point you think really happened, or things
Yeah.
like that. So yeah, in terms of laying out the parallel time, or different time branches, yeah, just give it a good way to say, yeah, branching off. I think that's a really good metaphor,
Yeah.
branching off of the main pathway.
Right. Even within the show itself, like you could argue that 1841 parallel time is a different parallel universe than 1970 parallel time because some of the information about Barnabas doesn't line up with
Yeah.
what they said in
Hmm.
1970. So is that a different parallel time? I mean, you could
I
argue that.
think that both in the main time branch and in parallel times, things are fluid.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
and one of the things I talked about in my introduction to the book is this is a universe in which magic is real and people are wielding it on a daily basis. People also are throwing themselves back in time. People
Yes.
are
Hmm.
also evoking the devil. So if somebody goes back in time on Tuesday and then Angelique is changing people's memories on Wednesday, and then and Nicholas is casting a spell on Thursday. By Friday, you have a very different reality than you did on Monday,
Right.
right?
Hmm.
And so I think all of this can easily be accounted for because of magic and time travel. It's like Aleah said, it's built into the show's DNA.
Yeah.
And it allows people to enjoy things like the 1991 show, or even the Tim Burton film, or the MGM movies, because they don't have to jive. They're another branch of parallel time.
Hmm.
There's a big Finnish audio about Jonah Rooney, who's killing Carolines in different realities.
Yeah. The flip side,
And
right? Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
thank you. For a moment, I blanked on that, so thank you. I really enjoy it. One of the things that I found funny or joy, like it's a cute thing that they did, is that among the Carolines are one in which she's a vampire and one in which she's a werewolf. So
Yeah.
Big Finish acknowledges the MGM films and Dark and the Burton film in that moment. And in Curse of Dark Shadows, Craig Hurd McKinney did something similar in which there's a page of about different branches of parallel time, and one of them is drawn like the newspaper strips.
Yes.
So those two stories are. I mentioned that in my introduction that's kind of my inspiration. We all have the same idea. Like if parallel time can be found by a parlor room, the other branches that exist would account for all the reboots. The fact that one version of Vicky lives in 1988, another in 1991, and another in
Mm.
2012. These are branches of parallel time, or that Carolyn's a werewolf in one reality.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
okay with all of this because for me, it's just more to enjoy, and none of it violates canon because it's a different timeline.
Right. And we were even talking about this the other day, and I always bring it up on the podcast, like you were talking about within the show itself, the inconsistencies, because in the pre-Barnabas episodes, I mean, Collinwood was built in the 19th century and all of this. So, but there's so much time travel in the show and parallel universes and magic that I think it's just things become very fluid in Collinsport. I totally agree with that.
Hmm.
It's just this timey-wimey stuff that's happening that's causing these fluxes. And it would be kind of fun. It would have been kind of fun if the show had continued and they realized, oh, we've really screwed up time. Now we have to fix it,
Broken the universe. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in addition to all of these great entries, which it still boggles my mind that you wrote all of those in your, because I did the Masters of the Universe Character Guide and World Compendium for Dark Horse, and also the supplementary edition. But we had a team of people working on that to write all the character entries and locations and all that. But you did all of this just on your writing it.
I'm a broken person.
The writing part of it on your own, and then Aleah proofreading it and doing the artwork. I mean, so it's just phenomenal. But in addition, you also have some essays in there, which I was honored to write the foreword for. So thank you for inviting me to do that. It was really fun.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Well, it was I figured, it's about family, the Collins family. So, and family is such an intrinsic thing in the Gothic. So I wanted to kind of address that. But so that was fun to write. But can you talk about some of the other essays in the book and who wrote them?
Yeah. So each of the four has a different purpose, but they're all built around the concept of what this book represents. So you talked about family. Your forward looks back at the show. The bookend to this is Craig's afterward, which is about legacy, because he's writing one of the current incarnations of Dark Shadows with the graphic novels. So we can look back at what came before in terms of the Collins family and their roots. On the other end of the book, looks forward as what's coming with the Collins family. We have there's a brief piece in there by Stuart Manning, who wrote the early Dynamite comics and also some Big Finish stuff. And his piece is charming. It's about his wish that really minor details ended up in my book. It's kind of funny. Like he focuses on not to give too much away, but he talks about Carolyn having an imaginary friend as a child, which she mentions in one episode. And Stuart hadn't seen the book yet. And so he wrote this piece saying, I hope that Rich talks about all this minutia. And I laughed when he sent it to me, because minutia is what this book is. So yeah, he nailed that one. And then what's the other one? Oh yeah, Ansel Farage wrote something more personal, because there's a character who really is integral to the show, but it never became a Collins except in one time branch, and that's Willie. And so it becomes hard to write Willie entries when Willie's existence, other than in parallel time, is never as a Collins. I can't put anything other than a Will Loomis entry in the book. But we do have Ansel talking about his friendship with John Carlin. So Willie gets his due in Ansel's essay.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, they're all great essays. Now there's a Kickstarter, Indiegogo happening for the book. So talk a little bit about the Indiegogo. When is that happening? And is that the only way to get the book? Because I've seen people asking about that on Facebook. Can they get it any other way, or is it?
So I think this week a press release is going out. I don't want to speak for the publisher because Aleah and I are waiting to see the press release. But as we understand it, the Indiegogo is just for pre-orders. Like, the book will be off. It's going to come out regardless of what happens with the fundraiser. It's okay. There will still be. I mean, it's still going to be mass released.
Okay.
Chinbeard, I think, is going to explain this in the press release coming soon.
Okay. What about the cover? We didn't talk too much about that, but it's a sensational cover.
It's from Robert Hammond, and who works with. So the publisher's name is Barnaby Eaton Jones, and I cannot tell you how many times Aleah and I have typed Barnabas.
Yes, that was
muscle memory. Is the four of us are in a chat, me, Aleah, Barnaby, and Robert, and 50% of the time I write Barnabas and then have to change it to Barnaby. So I told him yesterday that he has to change his name to Starbuck, because there's nothing. I was blown away when he sent us Robert's cover. It's nothing short of breathtaking. It's designed to look like a an ancient volume of forgotten lore, complete with creasing and staining. It's beautiful. But I actually think Aleah is probably, as an artist, probably better qualified to talk about it, because I can just gush and say I really love it, but she knows the technical side of things. So
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo what you said. I was delighted to see it. I think it's going to look great. It's going to be hardcover, so it's going to really look like a family, old tome, tomb or on the shelf. It's yeah, I
I've
mean,
I've always wanted to see something like that, like a Collins family history book, and now it's going
yeah,
to exist. How
yes.
many illustrations did you do total, Aleah? Or do you have a do you remember?
Oh, yes, I do. There's 10.
10? Okay.
So one for every, he has his book divided up into 10 timelines. And so there's one family portrait for each.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
So we're going to be finding out as soon as I hear about the pre-order and the Indiegogo, I will certainly announce it in the news segment of the podcast and post links to that as well. Last question I have here. Well, actually, before I get to my last question, is there anything else you want to tell us, either one of you, about the Collins family album that you want fans to know?
Oh, well, I didn't really talk about the backgrounds. The backgrounds are also very meticulously researched. They're all set in their houses, or in one case, it's on the front lawn of the mansion with the Ross books. But so they're all um, based in, their respective. I think the gold key's in the library. The 2004 pilot is in their little black and white tiled hallway. So there's,
I love what you
you'll
did with the background for the play.
Oh yeah, so the the play was a little bit simpler. If anyone's seen the play, it's a very relatively sparse black box production, but there's a few objects to kind of anchor you in the time and place. So yeah, it's also the Collins family decanter sitting there, or the Collins family banister behind them, or the Collins family window dressings. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Brian,
What she did with those portraits was captured the aesthetic of whatever it was that she was drawing. So when she was drawing the 1999 one, which she's actually working on right now, it really looks like the aesthetic of
yeah,
1991. But Gold Key looks like you opened up a Gold Key
I
comic,
love it. I love that.
and people are going to go nuts with the Ross one. That was the one that made me just go giggity giggity giggity, because it looks like a Ross cover. So everything about it's just so cool.
That is
Yeah,
sensational. Uh,
yeah,
you know what? It would be awesome if you did prints of those too, for the maybe for the 60th or something. Are you, and I know Rich can't make it to the 60th. Are
yeah.
you going to go to
My
the
son,
60th event,
yeah.
Aaliyah?
Yes, I will be at the 60th event.
Awesome.
I will see about bringing prints. I would like to. So I'll see.
Yeah, I think people would love that. And Rich, did you have anything else you wanted to add about the book that you want people to know?
One of the things that I included in it was, in addition to the entries, which are just alphabetical, but the front of the book has a breakdown of every character within a given timeline. So if a
Mm,
person wants to know how many Collinses were mentioned in the ever connected to the primary timeline, that number is there. I think it's
Mm.
123, but I'm doing that from memory, so I could be wrong. And then at the end, there's a bunch of resources that are things that are not covered in the book, but that people might want to look up just because they're great parts of Dark Shadows history, like Catherine Lee Scott's Dark Passages, or Hawks Harbor from S.E. Hinton.
mm.
Things that are not technically Dark Shadow stories, so I'm not going to have S.E. Hinton's characters in the book, but I wanted to acknowledge these are things that as a Dark Shadows fan are also part, or the house,
Mhm.
the Art Wallace TV show and Shadows on the Wall combined to become the Jason McGuire story.
Mm.
And I went to great lengths to have this be a look at the whole franchise, not just from a character standpoint, but the characters are the core of what this book is about. So if people go in looking up Nicholas Blair, they're not going to see an entry for Nicholas because he's not a Collins. But Nicholas appears in so many entries that he's covered. So the standpoint is from a Collins. It's Collins centric, but I tried to actually mention everybody because Nicholas affects other people, so
Sure.
he's in their entries.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you pointed out you're like some really in-depth indexes to each canon iteration. You have like
Right.
a distinguishing, I'm trying to remember, like TV 153, things like where it's like, okay, comes from this source or this episode number or this comic and this issue number. Like you have a system
Yeah, the
in place.
abbreviation key is kind of insane. I don't even know what I was drinking the day I came up with it. With so many, there's like a good. All told, there's a good between the number of episodes and the number of comics, and there's 1,600 stories. So I had to come up with something. It was writing episode 263 100 times just takes up way too much word count.
Yeah.
So I had to come up with an abbreviation system, and I think it works. Hopefully, it works.
Yeah, you have the key there, and it's like it's
Right.
pretty clear, like audio, whatever, it's 57.
Right.
So it's like, so the last question I have is, and I don't think I've ever asked you this, Rich, and Leah, this is your first time here. So, starting with Aleah, favorite character and favorite storyline from Dark Shadows, and why?
Okay, I lost you for just a second. Favorite character and
Favorite
favorite
character
storyline?
and favorite storyline, and why?
Okay. Well, my favorite character is Roger by far. Um, and my favorite storyline, I suppose it probably has the same justification as the Laura the Phoenix the first time. Um, I think why? I don't know why. I don't know. I really like the attitude. I like the way that I should say, particularly in the beginning, Roger is malicious, but not evil in the way the villains of the later show are malicious. He's malicious because he's scared and a little bit incompetent and very aware of that. And so I think Roger's an interesting character because you get to sort of see, Louis Edmonds take these psychological motivations for why he lashes out at David or Vicky or Burke or whoever it may be. Not usually Laura because he's usually scared of Laura.
Yeah.
But and then the Laura, I think the Laura arc is probably my favorite because it really blends the supernatural with the melodrama and the I would say like Freudian psychology that kind of runs through Dark Shadows. There's I mean, she is literally a monster, but it's also very much about motherhood and issues of divorce in the 60s or like the paternity question. All of these things are kind of blending together. And it's in my opinion, it's the most satisfying character growth that Vicky gets, because she comes in looking for her family. And then the Laura arc is kind of like Vicky finds it in the opposite way that she expected. She finds a son instead of a pair of parents. So it's just a fun. I'm like Rich said, the characters are the center of the whole thing, and I like the character driven aspect of that arc.
Excellent, excellent, wonderful. And how about you, Rich?
But before I answer, I just want to point out that when Aleah was visiting me, we actually watched a chunk of the Laura arc because I love it too.
It's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Underrated, I would say. Yeah.
Very much, but brilliant. Most people, if you ask that question, are probably going to say Barnabas, Julia, Angelique, or Quentin, right? I'm assuming most people say one or more of those four, and I love them all. But I'm a Stokes fan. I've always you can stick Professor Stokes or even Ben Stokes too, but Professor Stokes specifically in any scene and it gets better. And part of it is Thayer David's performance, but part of it is the fact that he's the only guy who calls everybody on their bullshit, and I love that. This is a show filled with liars. A show filled with people who can never just do what should be done, which is go, so here's what's happening. Instead, they go, oh, that's not happening. And then Stokes steps in and goes, come on, it's happening. And I just love that. I love the fact that he calls everybody on it. But I also like the fact that he's always the smartest guy in the room. And so for me, every time we got this close to him finding out about Barnabas, I wanted him to find out. And I strongly think he would if the show had gone on. I think it was heading there. So Stokes would probably be the character I really enjoy. In terms of storyline, I have two, and it's hard to pick which one. One is 1897. It suffers from going on too long, and so it drags at time. But there's so much about 1897 going on that's just absolutely insane, between Quentin being a half dozen different monsters at various points. And so I was going to say I have two favorite characters, and the other one, 1897, Mad Jenny.
Oh.
I absolutely adore Jenny. If I wish we'd ever gotten a Professor Stokes and Jenny scene, because my world might have imploded. I absolutely adore it. It's Marie Wallace's performance as Jenny is one of the best in the whole show. And I can empathize with her even when she's cackling and trying to stick a ridiculously long pair of scissors into somebody's face. And I just love her. But there's so much about 1897 that I love. There are parts where you go, okay, wrap it up a little. But really, I just love everything about it. And the other one, Jason McGuire. I don't, and like with Laura, I think that one gets overlooked too often. But it's a masterpiece of Art Wallace's era, and I just I cannot describe enough how much I enjoy, because it's the only time in the show that I think Joan Bennett was given material to really show that Liz is a formidable character who matters. A lot of the time, Liz is just a person who stands around and says, "But Barnabas, why?" And there's not a lot of times that Joan Bennett really had enough to do. But with Jason McGuire, she was gold.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I've talked about on the podcast when Dark Shadows really leaned into the monsters and supernatural stuff. The core family members, the human family members, kind of they were always there, but they were kind of went a bit into the background, in comparison to the spooky stuff that was going on, which is kind of a shame because they're all wonderful. But I'm glad none of them died. We can't. Right. I wish Roger had been in the summer of 1970 storyline.
I mean, technically, Vicky died.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Well,
that's true.
A few times.
Yeah. That's true. But nobody really dies in Dark Shadows.
That's
probably
true.
Jason McGuire's ghost is somewhere.
Wednesday,
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But wonderful. Well, thank you, both of you, for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you both.
Always.
Been a lot of fun. And folks, keep your eyes out for the Collins Family album from Chinbeard Books. As soon as I hear anything, I will certainly announce it here. Keep your eyes on Rich's website, social media, Aleah's website, social media. I'm sure you can hear about it there too. Be sure to check out their websites. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Terror at Collinwood is a Penny Dreadful production.